when we have a group of scientists, engineers, and architects and scholars, such as assembled by the various groups, the 9/11 Truth groups, Scholars for 9/11 Truth, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, soon Scientists for 9/11 Truth, we have a body of evidence based on a set of scientific principles that we all agree on. At Building 7, a 47-story skyscraper, not hit by an airplane on 9/11. It fell symmetrically, smoothly, at virtually free fall speed into its own footprint. And as it does, there is a tremendous surge of pyroclastic dust flow, like cauliflower enfolding itself, shaped like a cauliflower. The fire is enfolding itself due to the tremendous heat. Where did that heat come from? Most controlled demolitions are produced with C4 or RDX explosives. If you want to blame a building collapse on a fire, what you'd use is something more silent, such as thermite.
We also had a chance to speak to Professor Stephen Jones, who is a doctor of physics, concerning new bombshell evidence that conclusively proves that thermite was used to cut the main pillars in the World Trade Center towers.
There is this molten material flowing out of the South Tower just before its collapse. It has a large quantity of yellow hot metal. And then I read about these pools of molten metal underneath both towers and Building 7 after their collapses. Now that fits like a glove with the thermite reaction, which produces molten iron. You also see in these videos of this molten metal coming out, you see this white ash, this dust that comes off. Now that combination, yellow hot molten metal, white ash floating away, that's his signature characteristic for thermite. And then finally we got some samples of this metal, the previously molten metal. Using advanced techniques like proton-induced X-ray emission and an electron microprobe, we found out what's in these samples. We're finding iron, also sulfur, potassium, and manganese. And these are characteristic of a variation of thermite, which is used to cut through steel very rapidly. It's called thermate. It's like, sure, you can take a knife, you take the butter out of the fridge, and you cut through that butter. Now, adding sulfur to thermite and also potassium permanganate, these chemicals, it's like heating up your knife to a very high temperature. Now it slices right through the butter. Even if the butter is cold, slices right through. Thermite had to be planted in the buildings, which of course implies directly an inside job. Someone had to have access into the building.
Thermite's byproduct is molten iron. A molten iron is 4,000 to 5,000 degrees in heat, and this produces a tremendous pyroclastic dust cloud as well. The New York Fire Department found tons of this molten iron underneath not only Building 7, but underneath Building 1 and 2 as well, flowing like lava, they say. There's numerous witnesses, including the World Trade Center structural engineer, Leslie Robertson, who was quoted as saying, 21 days after the event of 9/11, the molten metal was still running. So where does that come from? As I mentioned, the byproduct of thermite is molten metal. Thousands of cutter charges placed throughout the building would produce tons of molten metal. Now, John Gross of the NIST denies that there's any molten metal, and this is a flat lie.
I'm curious about the pool of molten steel that was found in the bottom of the towers.
I am too.
And
just tell me about it. Have you seen it?
Well, not personally, but eyewitnesses there found huge pools of molten steel beneath the towers, and some scientists don't think that the collapse of the building could have melted all that steel. And physics professor analyzed some of the steel, and Stephen Jones, and he found evidence of thermate residue, which would explain how the buildings collapsed. by means of pre-planted explosives. So, have you analyzed the steel for any of those residues?
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, and no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah, like lava.
Like lava.
Steel-toed boots is one of the biggest things. Out still on the rubble, it's still, I believe, 1,100 degrees. The guy's boots just melt within a few hours.
This is how it's been since day one. Oh, it's unbelievable. And this is 6 weeks later, almost 6 weeks later. And as we get closer to the center of this, it gets hotter and hotter. It's probably 1,500 degrees. We've had some small windows into what we thought was a core at some point, and it looked like an oven. You know, it was just roaring inside. And it's just a bright reddish-orange color.
Mark Loiseau, the president of Controlled Demolition Incorporated, told the American Free Press that in the basements of the World Trade Center, where 47 central support columns connected to the bedrock, hot spots of literally molten steel were discovered more than a month after September 11th. These incredibly hot areas were found at the bottoms of the elevator shafts, down 7 basement levels. The molten steel was found 3, 4, and 5 weeks later when the rubble was being removed. He said that molten steel was also found at World Trade Center 7. The highest temperature was in the east corner of the South Tower, where a temperature of 1,377 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded. The molten steel in the basement was more than double that temperature.
One of the more unusual artifacts to emerge from the rubble is this rock-like object that has come to be known as the meteorite.
It's this fused element of steel, molten steel and concrete and all of these things all fused by the heat.
The temperatures that we know existed within the collapse within the debris pile are physically impossible from an atmospheric jet fuel fire. Cannot be done.
Underground, it was still so hot that molten metal dripped down the sides of a wall from Building 6.
However, they do hit hot spots occasionally and everything stops.
There were fires of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit below the ground.
I don't know that that's so.
There's video of it.
Around 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it's probably pretty difficult to get that kind of temperatures in a fire.
Well, NASA pictures, thermal images showed those sorts of temperatures in the basement.
Would you send them to me?
Okay.
My name is Mark, and I'm the individual who was questioning Dr. Gross, and he asked me to email to him those thermal images. When I approached him after his talk to get his email address for that purpose, he refused to provide it to me. I think this is important because it reveals the attitude of the NIST investigators, which is one of willful ignorance of what really happened on 9/11.